You'll hear more than enough from me in the coming days, so I apologize in advance. Okay, let me make sure this is working right. Perfect. Okay, a little bit of personal history. I started doing this, sad enough to say, 30 years ago now, off and on. 20 years full-time, 30 years I was still in school. Started working for a guy named John Bodden. He started an institute in Montana called the Political Economy Research Center with a couple of his other colleagues. They founded a whole new school of economic thought called New Resource Economics, and they started what was then called the free market, well, what's still called free market environmentalism. These are no longer new now, they're 40 years old almost. But they started this, and he came to Dallas. He was teaching at the McGuire. He ran the McGuire Oil and Gas Institute, and he founded a new think tank called the Foundation for Research on Economics and the Environment. And he hired me out of SMU. That's where I did my undergraduate. Now, John gave me a lot. I appreciate all that he gave me. The coat that I'm wearing today is 30 years old. He bought this for me because he wanted me to look the part, because I was a poor student on scholarship at SMU. But he, in particular, gave me 3 sayings that have stuck with me. And that's why I give you a little bit about my bio right here. The very first saying, people don't care what you know until they know you care. Anyone who's ever heard a podcast that I conduct, and we conduct podcasts daily at Heartland, knows the first question I ask every speaker is, who are you? Why did you begin to work on the environment or energy topic that you got to? And what does your institute or research center do? And why should basically, I want to get people to understand why they should care about what this person has to say. The second thing is, John always said we have the moral high ground. Now, he's an economist. I'm not an economist. In fact, he wanted me to become an economist. I thought economists really didn't know much about morality. I became a moral philosopher. My PhD is, my specialization is environmental ethics. Now, why do I say that? Well, I understood what John meant when he said we had the moral high ground. What he meant was, we have shown, and I think this is clear, that capitalism is more efficient at providing the goods and services people want than at the time communism was a living thing, the Soviet Union was still around. And that's clear. There's no question about that. But when my friends would come home from work and their kid was, say, caught cheating on a test at school, they didn't berate him or punish him because they thought he'd done it inefficiently. You didn't get away with it, so you're in trouble. That wasn't the point. There was something more. They thought he had done wrong, and it wasn't a matter of whether it was he cheated efficiently or not. The third statement, and that's where we come to here, is oil and ecology do mix. I like to say capitalism and the environment mix. Not only mix, as Todd said, capitalism is the best friend the environment has. Now, a lot of conservatives don't understand this. You know, it's like they understand how markets work, they understand school choice, they understand low taxes, they understand, but then when it comes to the environment, they think, well, there's something different there. It's more like national defense. You got to have government get involved because the greedy people doing their best interests are going to destroy the environment. So they get squishy on that. But they need to understand that, in fact, private property rights, the same thing that provide all these great goods and services that people love, that provide the best education system in the world, that provide the most wealth and the highest health in the world, these things called markets, they also provide the best environment. Now, I'll give you some examples. It's been a while now. I take it, I look around the room, I don't see anyone younger than the Soviet Union. There was a Soviet Union until 1990, before it fell. The Iron Curtain fell. And when it did, what we found out is the worst examples of pollution and environmental quality weren't in the West, where capitalism was rife, where greedy robber barons had raped the environment. No. It's all these places that had been protecting the environment under, you know, czars, under dictators, under communist rulers. You look at the Soviet Union. They have something called the Aral Sea, one of the largest inland seas. It's shrinking. And it shrunk dramatically under the Soviet Union. No state, no company, you'd never get away with what happened to the Aral Sea in the United States, or in England, or in anywhere in Western Europe. They literally drained the Aral Sea for agriculture, which killed all the fishing villages. But there's a problem. What does sea designate to you about the water in the sea? It's salt water. You know how good salt water is for irrigation? Not very good. So they destroyed farmland with these government-mandated pulling the seawater out. They destroyed farmland. And now the sea continues to shrink despite the fact that they're no longer diverting water from the Aral Sea for irrigation, just because they did so much damage. The wind is whipping around, more land is being reclaimed, the sea is drying up, and the salt water is becoming more and more salty. It's destroyed under government management. Air and water pollution in Poland and Czechoslovakia, both at that time behind the Iron Curtain. Terrible. Do you know what some people did for vacations in Poland and Czechoslovakia? The air was so bad, because they couldn't leave the country. Let's face it, they didn't jet off to Ibiza or the Bahamas. It's the Soviet Union after all. They went to salt mines and stayed a week underground because the air was so clean down there. Think about that. Your vacation was spent in the dark in a salt mine so you could breathe clean air. At schools, they would have air masks and oxygen tanks for students, so when they came in from playing outside, if they allowed them to go play outside, the air was so dirty. Lifespans were shrinking under Soviet rule. The environment was being destroyed. This would never have been allowed. This wasn't allowed in the United States, where capitalism is rife. Now, you've got to understand, environmental concern first arose in the West. Where were the first national parks? United States. European parks. Well, the kings actually set up parks aside. Where were concerns for, if you look at, property rights are key to environmental quality, at least if you don't want to live in poverty. Now, I'll show you something in a second, but before I get to that, think about the difference between, let's talk about elephants for a second. Everyone loves elephants. They look at them, oh, wonderful, wonderful animals. Now, most of us don't live next to elephants, and you'd be pretty happy about that, actually, if you had to. But we like the elephants. And there was a crisis with elephants. They were in huge, steep decline because of the ivory trade. No one wants ivory anymore. The problem is the decline in elephants was not universal. At one time, you had Kenya. Kenya had a thriving elephant population. They banned hunting in Kenya, and the elephant population took a sharp fall. They were protected by government. We're no longer going to allow hunting. We're protecting them. Under government protection, elephants declined. In South Africa and Zimbabwe, quite the opposite occurred. There, they're treated largely as private property, and people sold small numbers of hunting. The hunting paid for the damage the elephants did. I mean, basically what they do is they say, look, if you don't go out and slaughter these elephants that are destroying your crops, we're going to give you a cut of the hunting revenues. And so they were getting hard currency. And so they'd allow some of their crops to get destroyed and not slaughter elephants. In Kenya, slaughtering elephants. Not in South Africa and Zimbabwe. So they had growing elephant populations in places where they were treated as property. Think about what happened in the West. What happened? How did longhorn cattle do in the West compared to buffalo? Buffalo. Many more of them at one time slaughtered. Why? No one owned them. No one owned them. You couldn't control buffalo. You could keep cattle within fences. Cowboys didn't do well trying to manage buffalo. They didn't stay in fences. And then, of course, there was the problem that Native Americans relied upon the buffalo, the Plains Indians, And the Army wanted to control the Native Americans, so they killed the buffalo. Government slaughtered the buffalo. Markets didn't slaughter the buffalo. Let's look at some other species. In Texas, 30 minutes from here in Houston, you can go hunt animals from Africa. 5 minutes. Oh boy, it's gone fast. 5 minutes. Let me, does anyone know what that is? It's called a scimitar horned oryx. You can read it. It's endangered in Africa. It came from Africa. They're on ranches here in Texas. They're thriving here in Texas. This animal right here, Dama gazelle, thriving here in Texas, endangered in Africa. We have such good populations of Dama gazelles and scimitar horned oryx in Texas that we are now shipping them back to Africa to repopulate in countries where they're protected by law. They are thriving because people sell hunting rights to them here. Government started to interfere with that a few years ago. About 10 years ago, environmentalists sued and they said, hey, they're endangered. They're listed as endangered species on the endangered species list, even though they're a foreign species. You've got to not allow these crazy Texas ranchers to allow these species to be hunted. You know what the crazy Texas ranchers did? Well, some of them said, okay, we're going to slaughter them. Before the new regulations come in place, we're just going to sell them cheap because we don't want to feed them anymore. Other ones said, well, you know, we're not going to do that. We're just going to lure them into one little location on our ranch and build a fence around it and let them starve to death. It's not illegal to let them starve. I don't have to feed them. I just can't kill them anymore. Others just said, well, we're going to jack up the rates and you'll have to pay more if you want to hunt them and you'll have to go through the CITES thing. And what happened is Congress intervened because Fish and Wildlife did not want to list them. They said, look, they're thriving here. They're doing well. And so Congress got involved in a budget bill, attached a rider that said, no, Fish and Wildlife doesn't have to list these as endangered, and they're still thriving, and we're still shipping them back to Africa. Now, people don't realize the extent to which government caused the environmental problems that we have today. At one time, property rights, the common law, property rights, common law, was very strong in this country. And people who owned property or who owned rights to water rights could stop industry and stop the government from doing things that harmed their property and water rights. So, for instance, if you were a timber company and you were putting pollution into a stream that my cattle relied on or that I used for irrigation, I could go to court and I could have your activity enjoined. And the court said, look, he has a property right, you can't do that. If you were a municipality and you wanted to set up a new pollution control for your water system, and it was destroying, it was causing pollution, I could go and have that enjoined because it was destroying my downstream rights. And that didn't stop it necessarily. What you'd have to do is negotiate with me. We want to do this, we're making lots of money, we'll pay you to allow us to pollute your land. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. But the point is property rights defended the environment, and the government got involved. They said, we can't have these nasty property rights affecting progress. The business of government is business. So to promote business, they violated property rights by passing positive laws. And the court said, well, now there's a law in the books that says they can pollute all they want to. And what happened was the Cuyahoga River burned. The air pollution that we saw, the water pollution that we saw, that we then had to have big government solve through the creation of various laws and agencies like the EPA, were a creation of government policies to promote certain types of industries, certain types of industrialization, and a violation of property rights that previously stopped certain kinds of things. Now, let's talk about energy real quick. I don't have a lot of time. It's called the Kuznets curve, environmental Kuznets curve. Down on the, is there a pointer here? Yeah, let's see here. There's North Korea, Madagascar, Indonesia. Very clean environment, a lot of poverty, a lot of death. Here's America and Western Europe. I mean, this is developing here. So what happens in the Kuznets curve is in the early stages of development, pollution, environmental quality goes down. But as you become wealthy, you demand more and more environmental quality. So here's America, Western Europe, very clean environments once again. This is where China is. This is where India is. But once they reach that peak where people have a certain amount of income, they'll come down here. That's how environment is a luxury good. We demand more of it the richer we are. New York City, 1903, turn of the century. Dead horse in the street, kids playing around it. Same time period, New York City. You know what that is? Can you see it? Can everyone see this? It's over. That's horse dung. That's dung. They had to clean that. 180,000 horses in New York City in 1903. Do you not think oil and gas cars have cleaned that up? Sorry, you can ask more questions if you want during the session. My time is over.